She had just buried her mother, but the pain wasn't over. Standing alone at the airport, Maya discovered that her flight home had been canceled. He thought he was teaching her a lesson.
Ethan walked into a boardroom. He expected the biggest deal. He realized she owned the empire.
The last thing Bennett expected to hear after burying her mother was a calm voice at the airline counter saying, "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your ticket has been canceled." She thought it had to be a mistake, until her phone vibrated. A single text from her husband. "Maybe spending another few days there will teach you to stop ignoring your responsibilities." The airport suddenly felt colder than the rain outside. She looked down at the faded funeral program still folded inside her handbag. Her mother's handwriting was tucked between its pages, a grocery list she'd never had the heart to throw away. For the first time in years, Maya didn't cry. She simply stared at the message and whispered, "You have absolutely no idea who you've just become." Because the man who believed he controlled every part of her life had never once asked why a woman capable of changing entire industries chose to live like someone who wanted nothing more than an ordinary marriage. Some stories aren't born from hatred. They're born from silence, from years of swallowing words because peace seemed more valuable than being understood. I've learned something after listening to countless families tell their stories over the years. Pride rarely arrives wearing expensive clothes. More often, it hides behind everyday habits, interrupting conversations, making decisions without asking, believing love means ownership instead of partnership. What happened between Maya and Ethan Bennett wasn't one explosive argument. It was thousands of tiny moments, each one so small it almost looked harmless. Until one day, there was nothing left to ignore. If you've ever watched someone slowly lose themselves trying to keep a marriage together, this story may stay with you long after it ends. Maya Bennett had always been the kind of woman strangers underestimated. At 38, she preferred soft earth-toned sweaters instead of designer labels. Drove a 6-year-old hybrid SUV despite easily affording something luxurious, and volunteered every Saturday morning at the neighborhood literacy center in Atlanta's historic West End. The children adored her. She remembered birthdays. She never forgot anyone's favorite book. When someone struggled with reading aloud, Maya would quietly begin reading alongside them, not to correct them, but to remind them they weren't alone. Most people assumed she worked as a nonprofit administrator. She never corrected them. Her husband certainly never questioned it. Ethan Bennett, 41, saw himself as a provider, regional operations director for a national logistics company. Long hours, sharp suits, constant phone calls. He measured success through promotions, square footage, and networking dinners where everyone laughed just a little too loudly. When they first met 12 years earlier, Ethan loved Maya's quiet confidence. Back then, he called her refreshingly uncomplicated. Years later, he simply called her too emotional. It wasn't always cruel. Sometimes it sounded almost caring. "You don't need to stress about finances. I'll handle the important decisions. I already spoke for us." Tiny sentences. Tiny cuts. Tiny permissions he gave himself until asking became optional. Maya rarely argued. Not because she agreed. Because she had grown up watching her mother survive a marriage where every disagreement became another broken plate against another kitchen wall. Silence had once been survival. Unfortunately, silence often followed people into safer places where it became a prison instead of protection. 300 miles away in Savannah, Georgia, Evelyn Carter spent her final months in a modest blue house overlooking marshland, where white egrets landed every evening before sunset. Evelyn had been Maya's anchor, a retired public school music teacher whose greatest luxury was fresh flowers on Sundays and homemade peach cobbler shared with neighbors. Cancer had taken nearly everything except her humor. Even during chemotherapy, she joked that hospital gowns were proof fashion designers secretly hated patients. Whenever Maya visited, Evelyn refused to discuss dying. Instead, she asked questions. "What book are you reading? Have you planted tomatoes this year? Are you sleeping enough?" Never once. "How much money do you have?" Because Evelyn already knew, or at least she knew enough. Years earlier, when Maya inherited control of a family investment trust established by her grandfather, Evelyn made one request. "Promise me your wealth never becomes your identity." Maya smiled. I promise. And don't marry someone who loves your bank account more than your laugh. Maya laughed then. I think I've already found the right man. Evelyn smiled back. I hope he always keeps earning that title. At the time, everyone believed he would. Very few people understood where Maya's wealth truly came from. Her grandfather, Isaiah Carter, had started with a small engineering company during the 1970s. Over decades, through acquisitions, renewable energy investments, infrastructure technology, and careful partnerships, that single business quietly evolved into Carter Global Holdings. By the time Maya inherited majority voting control through a complex trust structure, the company had become worth nearly $50 billion. She never appeared on magazine covers, never attended celebrity galas, never posted private jets online. Professional executives managed daily operations. Independent boards made operational decisions. Maya served quietly as chairwoman through encrypted meetings, private reports, and long strategy sessions that often took place from an ordinary home office Ethan assumed belonged to her consulting work. He had never asked further. She had never volunteered more. Not because she feared losing him, because she wanted at least one relationship in life where she wasn't evaluated by numbers. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Terminal. Doctors estimated only weeks remained. Maya immediately booked flights. I'm leaving tomorrow, she told Ethan gently while folding black dresses into a suitcase. He barely looked away from his laptop. This week? My mom needs me. I've got clients coming in. I know. You know what? I'll probably be away for several days. He sighed. I already told everyone we'd host dinner Friday. My mother's dying. I understand that. His tone suggested he understood only the inconvenience. But you've always been dramatic with family situations. The sentence hung in the room. Maya slowly zipped her suitcase. I hope one day someone loves you enough to make you their emergency. He looked confused. She kissed his forehead anyway. I'll call when I land. Savannah smelled of salt water and magnolia blossoms. Evelyn was asleep when Maya arrived. Thin, fragile, almost transparent beneath crisp white hospital sheets. Hours passed before Evelyn finally opened her eyes. My favorite girl. I'm here. Took you long enough. Maya laughed through tears. You always complain about my timing. It's tradition. They talked until dawn. Not about death. About music. Old church picnics. Summer thunderstorms. The first bicycle Maya ever crashed into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox. They laughed so loudly, nurses peeked inside to make sure everything was okay. When sunrise painted the room golden, Evelyn reached for Maya's hand. Don't disappear inside someone else's expectations. Maya frowned. What do you mean? You've become quieter. I'm tired. No. Evelyn squeezed gently. You're shrinking. Maya looked away. Sometimes mothers notice the truths daughters spend years hiding. 3 days later, Evelyn Carter passed peacefully, before sunrise while gospel music played, softly from a portable speaker, beside the bed. Maya stayed there until nurses gently suggested it was time. Planning the funeral felt strangely mechanical. Flowers, programs, phone calls, food. Relatives arrived from Chicago, Detroit, Birmingham, and Charlotte. Stories filled the little church. Children Evelyn had once taught were now adults bringing children of their own. Everyone remembered something different. Her laugh, her patience, her stubborn insistence on homemade birthday cakes. After the service, Maya remained alone beside the fresh earth long after everyone else left. Rain began falling. She didn't move. Sometimes grief asks nothing from us except stillness. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, Ethan grew increasingly irritated. His coworkers asked where Maya was. Neighbors wondered how her mother was doing. Laundry piled higher than expected. Meals became takeout containers stacked beside the sink. He hated admitting how much she quietly managed every day. Instead, because she wanted at least one relationship in life where she wasn't evaluated by numbers. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Terminal. Doctors estimated only weeks remained. Maya immediately booked flights. I'm leaving tomorrow, she told Ethan gently while folding black dresses into a suitcase. He barely looked away from his laptop. This week? My mom needs me. I've got clients coming in. I know. You know what? I'll probably be away for several days. He sighed. I already told everyone we'd host dinner Friday. My mother's dying. I understand that. His tone suggested he understood only the inconvenience. But you've always been dramatic with family situations. The sentence hung in the room. Maya slowly zipped her suitcase. I hope one day someone loves you enough to make you their emergency. He looked confused. She kissed his forehead anyway. I'll call when I land. Savannah smelled of salt water and magnolia blossoms. Evelyn was asleep when Maya arrived. Thin, fragile, almost transparent beneath crisp white hospital sheets. Hours passed before Evelyn finally opened her eyes. My favorite girl. I'm here. Took you long enough. Maya laughed through tears. You always complain about my timing. It's tradition. They talked until dawn. Not about death. About music. Old church picnics. Summer thunderstorms. The first bicycle Maya ever crashed into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox. They laughed so loudly, nurses peeked inside to make sure everything was okay. When sunrise painted the room golden, Evelyn reached for Maya's hand. Don't disappear inside someone else's expectations. Maya frowned. What do you mean? You've become quieter. I'm tired. No. Evelyn squeezed gently. You're shrinking. Maya looked away. Sometimes mothers notice the truths daughters spend years hiding. 3 days later, Evelyn Carter passed peacefully, before sunrise while gospel music played, softly from a portable speaker, beside the bed. Maya stayed there until nurses gently suggested it was time. Planning the funeral felt strangely mechanical. Flowers, programs, phone calls, food. Relatives arrived from Chicago, Detroit, Birmingham, and Charlotte. Stories filled the little church. Children Evelyn had once taught were now adults bringing children of their own. Everyone remembered something different. Her laugh, her patience, her stubborn insistence on homemade birthday cakes. After the service, Maya remained alone beside the fresh earth long after everyone else left. Rain began falling. She didn't move. Sometimes grief asks nothing from us except stillness. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, Ethan grew increasingly irritated. His coworkers asked where Maya was. Neighbors wondered how her mother was doing. Laundry piled higher than expected. Meals became takeout containers stacked beside the sink. He hated admitting how much she quietly managed every day. Instead, he convinced himself she was staying longer than necessary. When Maya called that evening, exhausted after meeting with attorneys handling Evelyn's estate, Ethan answered with visible annoyance. So, when exactly are you coming home? The funeral was today. I know. I need another day. For what? There are legal documents. They can email those. It's not that simple. You've already been gone a week. My mother just died. I've got responsibilities too. So do I. Your responsibility is here. Silence. Finally, Maya whispered, I don't think you heard what I just said. I heard you. No. You heard words. Then she ended the call. Ethan stared at the screen. Instead of wondering why she'd sounded so defeated, he felt offended she'd hung up. The next morning, his frustration grew. He opened their shared travel account, saw her return ticket, thought about the conversation. Then, without calling, without asking, he canceled it. Refund issued. Confirmation email sent. He leaned back in his chair, believing he'd made a practical decision. If she wants to stay longer, he muttered, she can figure it out herself. He told himself it would encourage responsibility. Deep down, it was punishment. At Savannah International Airport, Maya rolled her suitcase toward the check-in counter. She looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion sleep cannot repair. The airline employee typed quietly, paused, looked confused. I'm sorry, Ms. Bennett. What is it? It appears your reservation was canceled yesterday. Canceled? Yes. There must be some mistake. The woman checked again. No, ma'am. It was canceled through the original booking account. Maya felt something heavy settle in her chest. She stepped aside, opened her phone. One unread message, from Ethan. Maybe spending another few days. There will teach you to stop ignoring your responsibilities. Around her, families hurried toward security gates. Children laughed. Announcements echoed overhead. Life continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside Maya, something finally broke free. Not anger. Not revenge. Recognition. She remembered every interrupted sentence. Every decision made without her. Every apology she'd offered simply to keep peace. every time she'd mistaken control for concern. She slowly closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the woman who had spent years protecting everyone else's comfort had quietly disappeared. In her place stood someone even Ethan Bennett had never truly met. She reached into her handbag, removed a slim black card embossed only with 3 silver initials. CGH. She dialed a number she had not personally called in almost 3 years. The phone rang once. A calm voice answered. "Good afternoon, Chairwoman Carter." Maya looked through the airport windows at the rain washing over the runway. Her voice was steady. "I think it's finally time we stopped protecting someone from the truth." The person on the other end replied softly, "Does this mean we're activating the succession protocols?" Maya closed her mother's funeral program and whispered, "Yes." Then she looked back toward the departure board, not wondering how she would get home, but wondering whether there was still anything left to go home to. The boardroom overlooked Midtown Atlanta, but Maya Carter barely noticed the skyline. She stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows with her mother's folded funeral program still tucked inside her leather portfolio. The paper had softened from being opened and closed so many times over the past 2 days. She traced the edge of it with her thumb before placing it gently back inside. Around the 12-foot conference table, executives who had worked with her for nearly a decade waited in respectful silence. No one rushed her. No one checked a phone. Every person in the room knew Evelyn Carter had passed away. The company's chief executive, Daniel Whitmore, finally spoke. "I'm sorry for your loss, Maya." She nodded. "Thank you." His expression remained professional, but there was genuine concern behind it. "You asked for an emergency meeting." "I did." She walked toward the head of the table, not because she enjoyed authority, but because that was where responsibility lived. "When my grandfather built this company, he used to say something that frustrated me when I was younger." She smiled faintly. "He'd tell me, the hardest decisions are rarely about business. They're about people." She looked around the room. "I think I finally understand what he meant." The room remained still. "For 12 years, she continued, I've intentionally separated this company from my personal life." Several executives exchanged brief glances. They all knew why. Maya had insisted on privacy from the day she inherited Carter Global Holdings. She wanted every friendship to be genuine, every conversation to be honest, every relationship to exist without the shadow of money. "I never regretted that decision." She paused. "But I did make one mistake." She inhaled slowly. "I believed that hiding my success would automatically create humility in the people around me." Silence settled again. "It doesn't." Daniel leaned forward. "What do you need from us?" Maya answered without hesitation. "Nothing illegal." A few relieved smiles appeared. "Nothing manipulative." More nods. "I simply want complete transparency." She looked directly at the company's general counsel. "If anyone asks about my position within Carter Global Holdings..." She stopped. "Tell the truth." Across town, Ethan Bennett walked confidently into his office carrying a coffee. He barely had time to drink. His assistant followed him. "Morning, Ethan." "Morning. You've got a conference call at 9, regional review at 10, and someone from Carter Global Holdings requested a meeting next Thursday." Ethan stopped walking. "Carter Global?" She checked her tablet. "Yes. They're reviewing logistics providers." His eyebrows lifted. That was interesting. Winning even a portion of Carter Global's distribution contracts could transform his division. "Who requested the meeting?" "They didn't specify." He smiled. "Good." He straightened his tie. "This could be the biggest opportunity we've had all year." Meanwhile, Maya drove home. Not to the mansion Ethan dreamed of owning one day. To the same comfortable brick house they had shared for nearly a decade. The flower beds were overgrown. The mailbox leaned slightly to one side. Nothing had changed. Yet somehow, everything had. She unlocked the front door. Inside, takeout containers crowded the kitchen counters. Laundry overflowed from baskets. Shoes lay scattered across the hallway. For years, she had quietly restored order every evening before Ethan returned from work. Today, she simply walked past the mess. Ethan arrived an hour later. He entered while loosening his tie. "You finally made it." No hug. No "how are you?" No mention of Evelyn. His eyes moved to the clutter. "You haven't cleaned?" Maya looked at him for several seconds, then calmly asked, "How was your week?" He shrugged. Busy. I can see. You could have told me your flight changed. My flight didn't change. It was canceled. He blinked. Right. You canceled it. I thought you'd stay longer. You thought wrong. I refunded it. You took away my ability to come home after my mother's funeral. I figured you'd book another one. She searched his face. Not for guilt. For understanding. There wasn't any. Only justification. I've apologized before for things that weren't my fault, she said quietly. I'm not doing that anymore. He frowned. What does that mean? It means this conversation isn't about airline tickets. She walked upstairs, leaving him standing alone in the kitchen. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar. Not regret, uncertainty. The following Thursday, Ethan arrived at Carter Global Holdings headquarters. The building itself reflected quiet confidence. Elegant. Modern. No unnecessary extravagance. The receptionist smiled. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. He nodded. I'm here regarding the logistics proposal. Of course. She handed him a visitor badge. If you'll follow the assistant, the executive committee is waiting. Executive committee? His confidence grew. This was even better than expected. The elevator climbed silently. 32nd floor. The doors opened. He followed the assistant into a polished conference room. Several executives already sat around the table. Daniel Whitmore greeted him warmly. Mr. Bennett. Pleasure. Please have a seat. Ethan opened his presentation folder. I'm excited to show you. The conference room doors opened again. He looked up. His heart stopped. Maya walked inside. Not wearing her usual soft cardigan. Not carrying grocery bags or library books. She wore a tailored navy suit. Simple. Elegant. Confident. Every executive in the room stood. Every single one. Daniel smiled respectfully. Good morning, Chairwoman Carter. Ethan stared. Chairwoman? No one laughed. No one corrected the title. Daniel turned toward Maya. We're ready whenever you are. She thanked him with a small nod before taking the seat at the head of the table. Not dramatically. Naturally, like someone who had occupied that chair hundreds of times. Because she had. Ethan's mouth felt dry. Maya! She looked at him politely. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. Not Ethan. Mr. Bennett. He forced a nervous laugh. What's going on? She folded her hands calmly. I believe you're here to present a logistics proposal. He looked around the room. This is a joke. Daniel answered. No, sir. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were annual reports, corporate governance documents, photographs, board appointments, financial statements. Every page carried the same signature. Maya Elizabeth Carter, chairwoman, majority voting trustee, for nearly 12 years. His breathing became shallow. No. He looked back at Maya. You own this company? I help lead it. This $50 billion company? She answered simply. Approximately? The room remained silent. Nobody seemed impressed. Because for them, this wasn't news. Only for Ethan. His mind replayed years of conversations. You don't understand business. I'll make the financial decisions. You don't need to worry about important things. Each sentence returned like an echo. Each one suddenly unbearable. He whispered, Why didn't you tell me? Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her portfolio. She removed the worn funeral program from her mother's service. A small handwritten note slipped onto the table. She picked it up carefully. My mother wrote this years ago. She unfolded it, then looked directly at Ethan. I kept waiting for the day you'd love me enough that my wealth wouldn't matter. Her voice never rose. It never came. The room remained silent. No one reached for a glass of water. No one interrupted. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed louder than before. Ethan looked at the handwritten note in Maya's hand as though it contained the answer to every question, racing through his mind. What did it say? He asked quietly. Maya unfolded the yellowed paper. The day before I married you, my mother slipped this into my Bible. She read aloud. If a man ever makes you feel smaller so he can feel bigger, don't hate him. Pray for him. But never stay so quiet that you forget who God created you to be. She folded the note again. I carried it for 12 years. Ethan lowered his eyes. I never knew. No, Maya replied. You never asked. Daniel Whitmore stood. Chairwoman, would you like us to postpone today's meeting? She considered the question before nodding. Yes. The executives quietly gathered their documents. Not one of them looked at Ethan with pity or contempt. They simply respected Maya enough to give her privacy. Within moments, the enormous conference room was empty except for the two of them. For the first time in years, there was nowhere for either of them to hide behind schedules, emails, or excuses. Ethan finally spoke. So, everything was real? Maya gave a faint smile. What part? The company. Yes. The board. Yes. The investments. Yes. You. She looked at him. I've always been real, Ethan. He rubbed both hands over his face. I don't understand. I know. You lived in our little house. Because I liked it. You drove that old SUV. It worked perfectly. You volunteered every Saturday. I still will. His voice cracked. But it's why. She answered without hesitation. Because I never wanted money to become the loudest thing about me. Ethan sank into a chair. His entire understanding of his marriage had collapsed. For years, he believed he had been carrying the family financially. Now he realized Maya could have purchased the company he worked for dozens of times, without noticing the expense. Yet she had never used that power. Never embarrassed him. Never corrected him in public. Never reminded him who she really was. Instead, she had simply loved him. He whispered, I've been a fool. Maya didn't respond. She had spent too many years hoping he would reach that conclusion on his own. After several long minutes, Ethan looked up. I canceled your flight because I wanted you to feel guilty. The words hung in the room. I kept telling myself it was about responsibility. He laughed bitterly. It wasn't. It was control. Maya nodded. Yes. I hated that you weren't here taking care of everything. Yes. I wanted to punish you. Yes. Every admission felt heavier than the last. I've become someone I never wanted to be. Maya's expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with compassion. That's the first honest thing you've said today. Weeks passed. Contrary to what Ethan feared, Maya never used her position to destroy his career. She never called his employer. She never leaked his behavior to the media. She never tried to embarrass him. Instead, she moved into the guest house on one of Carter Global's quiet properties overlooking a lake outside Atlanta. She requested time away from the board. Every evening, she walked along the water with her mother's note folded inside her pocket. Grief still came unexpectedly. Sometimes while making coffee, sometimes while hearing an old gospel song, sometimes while passing a garden center where her mother would have insisted on buying just one more flower. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary. Ethan's life, however, changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. Without Maya quietly managing everything at home, he realized how much invisible work she had carried. Cooking, appointments, remembering birthdays, checking on neighbors, sending anniversary cards, calling his father every Sunday because Ethan often forgot. The house became painfully quiet, not because it was empty, because it had lost the person who had quietly filled it with care. One Saturday morning, Ethan found himself driving to the literacy center where Maya had volunteered for years. Children were reading beneath colorful murals. A little girl looked up. Are you Miss Maya's husband? He nodded. She smiled. She's really nice. Another child joined in. She helped me finish my first chapter book. A teenage volunteer laughed. Half this neighborhood learned to love reading because of Miss Maya. Ethan stood speechless. None of them mentioned Carter Global. None of them cared about billions. To them, Maya wasn't a business leader. She was simply the woman who remembered their names. For the first time, Ethan understood the kind of wealth that never appeared on financial statements. Several months later, Maya agreed to meet him. Not at an expensive restaurant, not in a boardroom. At the botanical garden where they had shared their first date 12 years earlier. The autumn leaves painted the paths in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan arrived early. When Maya approached, he noticed something different. She looked lighter, not happier, freer. He stood. Thank you for coming. She smiled politely. You said you wanted to talk. I did. He handed her a small envelope. She opened it. Inside was a copy of the refund receipt for the canceled airline ticket. Across the front, Ethan had written in blue ink, The worst decision I ever made wasn't canceling your flight. It was believing I had the right to control where your heart belonged. Maya looked at him quietly. I can't change what I did, he continued. I've started counseling. She nodded. I know. I've apologized to your family. I know. I've been volunteering at the literacy center. A faint smile crossed her face. I know. He laughed softly. Of course you know. I don't expect another chance. He took a slow breath. I just wanted the woman. I hurt to know that I'm finally becoming the man I should have been. Maya closed the envelope. My mother used to say that apologies are seeds. He looked at her. They're only meaningful if you keep watering them. A year later, Carter Global Holdings announced a major initiative funding literacy programs, hospice care, and scholarships for public school music teachers across the country. The foundation bore a simple name, the Evelyn Carter Foundation. At the dedication ceremony, reporters asked Maya why she had invested so heavily in education instead of building another luxury development. She smiled. Because my mother taught children to believe in themselves long before anyone believed they were important. The crowd applauded, but Maya's eyes drifted toward the back of the audience. Ethan stood quietly among hundreds of guests. Not in the front row, not beside her. Exactly where he had chosen to stand. When their eyes met, he didn't wave. He simply placed a hand over his heart in silent gratitude. Maya returned a small nod. Some relationships survive. Others transform into something different. Not every broken marriage is meant to be restored. Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing someone the space to become accountable for their own choices. Maya never regretted hiding her fortune, because the money had never revealed Ethan's character. His choices had, and Ethan eventually understood a truth that no promotion, title, or paycheck could teach. Real power isn't the ability to control another person. It's the discipline to honor them, especially when no one is watching. If this story made you think differently about love, respect, or the quiet ways people carry one another, thank you for spending this time here. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the character we choose to leave behind.